few days that you've had off in what, 3 or 4 months? Well, Caleb is still not feeling well tonight, so we are going to be in the book of Acts again tonight. So we made it on Sunday to Acts chapter 12, and that's where we'll pick up tonight. There should still be some handouts in the back if you don't have one. But Acts chapter 12, and we just kind of started this chapter, hadn't got really far, but we were looking at one of the things about this chapter that's significant that I thought was interesting, Brother Mosier had said, was that this really is a chapter about government oppression upon the church. And so if you think about it, the last time we saw persecution was when Paul in chapter 9 was in Jerusalem, and he was chased out of Jerusalem, and he went back to Tarsus, and that was the first time, or that was really the last time we saw persecution for the church. It was stated after that Paul was, or the church had great peace, and the church grew because of that. And so now we get to chapter 12. We're opening up to this first statement here by Herod. What he did was he killed James. Now, who was James? There's many Jameses, so you got to keep track. Yeah, the brother of John. This would have been James, one of the apostle James. And so we see that Herod was stretching out his hand to harass some of the church. Now, it's interesting, his intentions was not to harass. The word harass there, which is where we started, the word harass means to harm, mistreat, cause evil to, or oppress. His intentions was to cause harm to the church. And so if you are trying to destroy an organization, which we know he can't stop the growth of the church. God is in control of what's going on. And God is not going to allow the church to end. Of course, here we are 2,000 some years later, roughly 2,000 years later, and we are still reading and obeying the gospel and being a part of the church that they were a part of at that time. And so, you know, his intentions was to cripple the church. And how would he do that? How would you cripple a group of people? Persecution. Who would you go after? The leaders. And obviously they knew that the apostles were the leaders. And of course, because the apostles, the foundation upon which the church is built was upon Christ and his teachings. His teachings was given to the apostles to teach. So he knew. Herod knew what was going on. He knew where to strike. And his first action was to kill James. Now, we talked about who this Herod was. This is Herod Agrippa. Herod Agrippa was the grandson of Herod the Great. Herod the Great was the one that ordered the children under age of 2 to be killed, every one of them, because he was trying to kill Christ. And so, as we talked about, the Herods were very wicked people. And the Herods, the family, was very crazy. Not only wicked, but very crazy. And but they had a lot of clout with Rome. Rome liked them. Maybe because they were so aggressive. Maybe because of who they were. Rome liked the Herods. And the family stayed in power for many years. So, if I remember right, Herod, the family lineage of Herod, came from Idumea. So, Idumea, no, they're not. The Roman people came from, we get a map here, Idumea, so this area down here in Judah. And originally, the people of were descendants of those at the book of Obadiah. Trying to think of the name of the people. The book of Obadiah was written, huh?
Edom?
Yes, I think it's Edom. The Edomites. And starts with a P, the town, the city, the fortress, Petra. Petra, yeah. So the book of Obadiah is written to the people in Petra who thought that they could never be conquered, which they did. But not all of them were wiped out, and so they were absorbed into Judah. They moved to Idumea, and Herod came from that lineage.
They were a type of Jewish people then, or no?
No. Well, they were related because the Edomites were related to Israel through, family history.
They were Romans last time.
No, they were not. Like Josephus. Josephus was a Jew, but Rome liked him because he was a sympathizer to Rome. But yeah, so it's interesting. Here you have, God told them to wipe out the Edomites, and they didn't do it because of their wickedness. And in a roundabout way, what happened? Well, Herod came from that, and then Herod oppressed the church and really the Jews for many years. So the Herodian lineage. And so Agrippa was a part of that. So it's kind of interesting. Like I said, I like history. So it's kind of interesting to see where all this happens. But Herod Agrippa is the one that we're looking at here. Herod Agrippa ended up with most of the area of Israel. So it was split out between some of his family, but he killed them all and took over their areas. So, like I said, they like to kill each other, even their family members and their parents, just because they were scared of each other. So there's a lot of history there if you want to dig into that. That gives us the character of Herod. So that helps you understand what Herod the Great was like when he said, just kill all the babies that are 2 years old and under.
It seems like bad decisions of sin always come back to bite.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's not designed that way, is it? Or is it?
I don't know, because you think about Israel when they went in to take over Palestine originally. They wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. They were supposed to completely wipe out the people of that. And if you go through the book of Judges, they didn't. And and then what it did was it came back to them, those people, taking them into captivity.
Was that by design?
I think God had a hand in that because of their disobedience, lack of following what He said.
Today?
I don't know.
I'm just like bad decisions we make with our kids or whatever. Does that bite us in the end?
I don't know. I think that our actions bring consequences that can be felt later on. Sometimes our actions can affect our family, things like that.
Galatians 6:7, do not be deceived, God is not mocked, for whatever a man sows, that he will also reap.
Yeah. And that's many examples of Israel when they did not.
Says it,
Yeah. So.
fancy words, but.
But you think about it. That is what we see here is, Herod was a result of Israel not doing what they're supposed to do, and his family, and they did a lot to hurt Jews in this area, and in Christianity. And so his intentions was to harm the church. So what does he do? He first goes to James. Now, not much is said about James's death. Clark says this, that this is the commentator, Clark, but he says, this James was his brother John, with his brother John, were those who requested to sit at the right and left hand of our Lord, in Matthew 20, verse 23. And our Lord's prediction was now fulfilled in one of them, who by his martyrdom drank of our Lord's cup and was baptized with his baptism. And so the idea of what he's talking about here is that he ended up losing his life for following Christ. And that was going to happen. All of them did. Clark says, a killing with a sword. I thought that was interesting. Killing with a sword was a Roman as well as a Jewish mode of punishment. Killing with the sword was the punishment which, according to the Talmud, which is a Jewish Judaism, huh? It is. It's their religious history and things like that. Was inflicted on those who drew away the people to any strange worship. James was probably accused of this, and hence the punishment mentioned in the text. So they would kill someone by the sword for pulling in their minds away from Judaism. And so because of what James was doing as an apostle and teaching the truth, which they did not agree with, he was killed with a sword.
Assume that means beheaded.
Yeah, more likely probably beheaded. We're not told exactly, but that's more likely what it was. So, and so here we see that's exactly what Herod did, verse 2. Then verse 3, and because he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to seize Peter also. Now it was during the days of the unleavened bread. So, Herod is trying to inflict this. He sees the happiness the Jews had watching James die. And he's like, I'm going to do some more of this. Who's the next person I could go? Well, of course, Peter. And so he goes for Peter. And so notice the tolerance. I think it's really interesting. The Jews, during the time of Christ, what were they looking for? What was their focus? Of course, they were looking for an earthly, but it was an earthly what? King to do what? To rule and relieve them of the Roman oppression. So it's just amazing, the Jews and their hypocrisy, because they're looking for the person to free them from Roman oppression. And then when they're mad at Christ and they don't like what he did, what do? Yeah. Yeah. They sided together. They wanted Rome to do what they did. And so now you have the apostles going out and preaching and teaching. And what do? They're siding with the Romans. They're wanting the Romans because Herod is he's a Jew, but he is appointed by Rome to be in this position. So they are wanting this to be done to these people, to the Jews. And so they had an intolerance for what they would call the heathens, the Romans, but they didn't care about the Christians living. They didn't care that the Christians were teaching the truth. And so this killing of James made him the first apostle to be killed, and his spot was not filled. But what happened with Judas when he killed himself? What did they do in Acts chapter 1? They replaced him, right? Now we are seeing the first time an apostle being killed, and they're not replacing his position. From this point forward, the numbers get lower and lower, because what we're going to see later on is more of them do end up losing their lives. Paul, of course, later on. And so we're seeing this happen. All right, so now we get to verse 3. It says, he proceeded further to seize Peter also. Now it was during the days of the unleavened bread. The days of the unleavened bread. This would have been at the later end of March, or the first part of April. This time would be at the end of the Passover feast. Why he chose this time is really not is unknown, but under Jewish law, he would not be able to slay Peter during the Passover or during this feast time. They had laws against that. And so, of course, he would have upset the Jews by doing something against their law, so he had to wait. So we're seeing Peter not be killed immediately like James. We're seeing Peter be what? Thrown in prison. So they're waiting. He's waiting for this feast time to be over so that he could then kill Peter. Now, verse 4, something as a side note. Somebody have the King James read verse 4. Anybody in here got that?
And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to four
Yeah.
soldiers to keep him, intending after, it says Easter, but
Yep.
that's mistranslation,
Yeah. And so the word Easter is used there. Now, this really is a terrible translation. King James is the only one that has that word Easter in it. Every other translation uses Passover. And that's really what this means. Easter was not a holiday. It's focusing on the Passover. And so this is from Barnes, and like I said, he gives a lot of history. But he says this on it, and I thought it was interesting. The translation is not only unhappy, as it does not convey all the meaning of the original, but because it may contribute to foster an opinion that such a festival was observed in the time of the apostles. The word Easter is a Saxon origin, and it's supposed to be derived from, I'm not even going to pronounce it, the goddess of love, or the Venus of the north, in honor of whom a festival was separated by our pagan ancestors in the month of April. So Easter was a celebration of the Saxon religion for this goddess of love. Since this festival coincided with the Passover of the Jews and with the feasts observed by Christians in honor of the resurrection of Christ, the name came to be used to denote the latter. And so because there was a Jewish holiday that came from this, or a Christian, in a sense, Christian holiday, they put them together and created what people use today as Easter. Now this is not, it's not followed, it's not talked about really in the Old Testament or the New Testament at all. It's just that word is used here. Other history that I've found stated that when the King James Version was translated, that King, what was it, Richard? No, King James. It's King James. Wanted the word to be put in there because he wanted that festival to be, or that holiday to be observed, and so he had that translation used. So we don't really know, but we just need, I think what's important is the notice is that it should be Passover, and that's what it's talking about here.
Would it be fair to say that that term, kind of like the word dinosaur, came along way after the event?
I don't know.
Or was it
Because Easter was observed during the time of the translation of this.
So was it? Yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
But not at the time it happened.
No, but they are talking definitely about the Passover. The Jews had the Passover feast, and this is when this happened,
Okay, so when this happened, what do you think they called this holiday?
the Passover.
Okay, what do the people who celebrated the pagan gods of love call it?
I think it's what they called Easter,
So
but that was later on.
So this term has been around since this was written.
No,
Just since
the word Easter came around during the Anglo-Saxon time, which would have been medieval times.
Have the word.
No, they did not have the word then.
What about tyrant lizards?
Well, that's what in Job they're called Behemoth and Leviathan.
Yeah,
But
so
they didn't have the word dinosaur till 1800.
yeah, so if you look at a lot of commentators, like Barnes, Clark, a lot of writers wrote their commentaries in the 1800s. They did not have the word dinosaur then. The word dinosaur did not come along until late 1800s. And so they didn't know what to call the Leviathan or the Behemoth in the book of Job. So if you're reading that and you're looking at a commentary, they'll say, well, it's a big lizard, it's this or that, because they didn't have a term. They didn't have the word dinosaur. It wasn't coined until later in the 1800s. And so, yeah, that's a little different, though.
Easter was kind of the same way. That word wasn't invented until.
No, it wasn't invented until the Anglo-Saxon time.
The term dinosaur comes from the Greek words dinios, meaning fearfully great lizard.
Yeah. But it wasn't used to describe, like, the bones that they were finding until the late 1800s.
So you're just saying like they didn't know what to say.
Yeah,
It was a giant thing.
yeah. I think it's a little different, because this term wasn't used till the medieval times. So,
It's just odd that they were so picky about, or not picky, but, when they translated it, everything had to be exact or they were killed.
Yeah.
And then Easter is thrown in there.
I know.
Just don't understand it.
yep.
Well, something else interesting to me is that he's being so picky to observe the Passover because it was against their religion. But the way they took Jesus and gave him that mock trial was against every rule they had.
Yeah. Well, and that's why they were called hypocrites.
But it's interesting that he's so careful to observe it here,
Yep. And it's just the hypocrisy that you see with, and really in false teaching, there's always hypocrisy. There's always problems, and you see that here too. So.
Do you think he was like honoring the Jews by just allowing them to finish their,
Quest.
Their
Their quest.
Yeah, their quest, and then that's their thing, and then now make a spectacle of Peter after it. I don't know.
I don't know. It's easily could have been where Peter was killed here, but he wasn't, as we're going to see. Why James died and Peter did not, we don't know. They all died at different times, and John supposedly lived out his whole life, but he was also covered in tar and feathers, and was put on the island of Patmos. So I don't know if that was really good or not, but they all died by the hands of the Jews, or Rome. All right, so then verse 4, it says, "So when he had arrested him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 squads of soldiers to keep him, intending to bring him before the people after Passover." And so, we're looking at here this. He put him in the prison in chains, and he put 4 squads. So this word here means 4 soldiers. So really it was 16 soldiers. So 4 squad, 4 times 4 is 16. So he had 16 soldiers just keeping an eye on Peter. That's pretty severe, yeah. I mean, he's wanting to make sure that Peter does not leave at all. And so remember that as we go through this, because you have 16 men, and they're all put at different positions. You have some that are chained with Peter, so that they're there with him where he is at in the prison. Then you have a gate that's going to have soldiers standing there, and then you have another gate where there's soldiers standing. And so there is several layers of protection to make sure that Peter does not leave. Herod is very serious about this.
Do you think it's because the body of Jesus?
I don't know. It could be.
That they were worried that Peter would escape?
Yeah. I mean, they obviously knew they were able to perform miracles, so maybe he thought something could happen here. And he was right if he thought that.
In him somehow, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So verse 5, it says, "Peter was therefore kept in prison, but constant prayer was offered to God for him by the church." And so the church here was praying for Peter. The word constant prayer means fervent, very intense. So you had, really, this is the first example we have of a group of people coming together in as you say, like a prayer meeting, and they're praying for one specific thing. Now, we're not told what they're praying for. We just are, what they're saying, we're told that they're praying for Peter. But, some different theories on what they were praying for later, because they were surprised to see Peter. And so what were they praying for? We don't know. We just know they were praying for Peter, the situation, whatever the case may be. And so a lot of prayer, a lot of intense prayer for him. So then verse 6 says, "And when Herod was about to bring him out that night, Peter was sleeping, bound with 2 chains between 2 soldiers, and the guards before the door were keeping the prison." So not only was he chained up, he was chained to 2 people. So more than likely on each side of him, they had stocks on his feet, maybe their hands too, making sure that, if he moved, they would have known. And so very serious about what he wanted done here. Verse 7, "Now behold, an angel of the Lord stood by him, and a light shone in the prison, and he struck Peter on his side and raised him up, saying, 'Arise quickly.' And his chains fell off his hands." And so Peter is in deep sleep. I don't know if I'd be sleeping that good, knowing that the next day I probably was going to die. But, he's confident and know where he's going. But still, that's going to be stressful. Why he was in deep sleep, I don't know. Maybe he was trying to get a good night's sleep. But he was asleep enough that the angel had to smack him. Get up, wake up. But think about that. You have Peter and 2 soldiers, and the angel smacks him and yells at him and tells him to get up. And they don't know nothing. It's just showing the miraculous of what happened here. They were completely dead to the world of what was going on with Peter in this situation.
I imagine they were getting the same sleep Adam got when he had his rib removed.
Yeah, yeah, you're probably right.
And not only that, there was a light there.
Yeah, the light, it's dark, very dark probably. And have a light shining through the gates. Yeah, they didn't see that at all. And so verse 7, it struck him on, it says, arise quickly, and the chains just fall off his hands. They're just gone. Verse 8, then the angel said to him, gird yourself and tie up your sandals. And so he did. And he said to him, put on your garment and follow me.
Put your shoes on.
Yeah.
You can go.
Not only that, he says, put your clothes on. He says, get your clothes on, put your outer garment on, get your shoes on, and get going. So he was sleeping comfortably, I guess, as best he could. But he tells them to get up and get dressed and let's go. And so he rises, his chains fall off his hands. And then verse 8, it says, then the angel said to him, or gird yourself. So then verse 9, so he went out and followed him, and did not know that what was done by the angel was real, but thought he was seeing a vision. So Peter, he thinks he's just seeing a vision, which, has he seen a vision before? Yeah, he has. 2 chapters ago, he saw a vision of the blanket coming down with all the animals and stuff on it. So, it's he's probably thinking, I'm just dreaming here. And so you imagine walking out of this prison in this day is like, this is just a dream. And so nothing's going to happen to me, of course. Verse 10, when they were past the first and second guard posts, they came to the iron gate that leads to the city, which opened to them of its own accord. And they went out and went down one street, and immediately the angel departed from him. So not only does he go out of the prison, gets to the main gate of the city, the gate opens for him. They walk down another street until he is completely at safety. I mean, he's away from the prison, he's away from the guards, he's away from anybody going to know where he's at. And once he gets to that point, the angel leaves him. And then verse 11, and when Peter had come to himself, he said, now I know for certain that the Lord has sent his angel and has delivered me from the hand of Herod and from all the expectation of the Jewish people. So now Peter realizes what really had happened. He realizes he's not dreaming. He's not sleepwalking. This really did happen. And he's free. And so he's come to himself. He's processing this. He realizes what's going on. And he's praising God for what he had done. And at the end of that, he says that God has delivered me from the hand of Herod and from all the expectation of the Jewish people. What that means is, they wanted him dead, Herod wanted him dead, and God delivered him from that. It was not time for Peter. God was not done with Peter. Peter still had other work to do. And so he knows this. And I think with that, he understood that he had a purpose and he needed to get to work. And so verse 12. So when he had considered this, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together praying. And so he gets to this home. Now this home is the home of Mary. I know you guys don't have this part yet. This is some notes that I was working on tonight. But he gets to this house, which is the house of Mary. Now this Mary is... what verse are we at? 12. This Mary would have been the Mary, the mother of Mark. Now Mark was the writer of the Gospel of Mark. So this would be this Mark. And so it was his mother, Mary. There was a ton of Marys in the Bible. So it's hard to keep track of which Mary is being talked about. So that's why it was said, the Mary, the mother of Mark. And she must have had a nice home. Her home here had an outer door, which would have led to a porch or a court before you got to the inner home. And so he comes to this door of the gate of the home, he can't get through it. He has to knock, and they have to open it from the other side, probably for safety. But she must obviously have a nice home where she lives, big enough to hold very many Christians. Maybe the church met in her home too. We're not told. But verse 13 says, and Peter knocked at the door of the gate. A girl named Rhoda came to answer. We're not told anything about Rhoda except her name. Now this name is a Greek name signifying a rose. So that's all we know about her. Rhoda means rose. But he knocked at this door, which is the entrance to the home. And then verse 14 says, when she recognized Peter's voice because of her gladness, she did not open the gate, but ran in and announced that Peter stood before the gate. She obviously knew who Peter was. She recognized his voice. What did that mean? She'd seen him before. She'd probably heard him preach. She's probably been around him a lot. And so she didn't even have to see him. She just heard his voice and knew that he was there. So then she's excited. She runs in. She doesn't even open the gate. She runs in and she tells everybody that he's out there. So then look at verse 15. It says, but they said to her, you are beside yourself. Yet she kept insisting that it was so. So they said, it is his angel. Now, she thought they thought she was insane. That's what that phrase really means. They're going, you're crazy. There's no way that he is at the gate. What have they been doing? Praying. You know, a lot of times we can go to this passage and say, well, did they really, because there's really two outcomes from this, or two things that we can think about. They're praying for Peter, but when he actually is at the door, they don't believe it. So you could say that they didn't really believe in the prayer that they were praying. And that's one way to look at it. But also, are we told what they were praying for? No. And really with the statement where they said at the end, it is his angel, what are they supposing has happened to Peter? He's dead.
I mean, the persecution that was going on, I could also see that. It's like they prayed, but they assumed that he would die because that's what's happening right now.
Yeah.
So I could see that side of it too, even though they tried praying.
Yep.
You know, they knew possibly what his fate was going to be anyway.
Yeah, I think that's the case. Because they thought he was this angel. I think they already thought he was dead. Because what had just happened to James? James was killed. So they're supposing he's dead. They're not going to get news of that very quickly. You know, I don't think they had TV where, they didn't have TV, of course, to tell them, oh, this person got executed. No. It's going to have to be spread by word of mouth. So they're assuming he's already gone. So what were they praying for? We don't know. And we can imply, you could say, they're praying for the situation. Maybe they're praying that he wouldn't be tortured. Christians were being tortured during that time.
Maybe for his strength to face what was coming.
Yeah.
Because they knew he was going to die.
Yeah.
For the family.
Yeah, for his family, because Peter was married. For his wife, maybe possibly his kids.
Often that's what we do when people lose loved ones here,
Exactly. It could be praying for strength for them, because Peter was very influential and a big part of their lives. And so we don't know, but I think it's not the best to just jump to this and say, well, they just had a unbelief in prayer. They didn't really believe God was going to, and I've heard that many times in my life. Well, they just didn't believe in their praying, and how could they be that way? Well, I think there's more to it than that. I don't think that was the case. And so they don't really believe he's there. So then verse 16, we're about out of time. It says, now Peter continued knocking, and when they had opened the door, they saw him. They were astonished. They saw him, and they were amazed that he was alive. He was there. And so verse 17, it says, but motioning to them with his hand to keep silent, he declared to them how the Lord had brought him out of the prison. And he said, go tell these things to James and to the brethren. And he departed and went to another place. So they're excited to see him. He motions to them to be quiet. And he says, this is what happened to me. Go tell James and I am going to go somewhere else. And so, with them being excited, what's that going to do? It's going to cause a ruckus. It's at night. People are going to hear. It's going to cause a stir. There's going to be problems. Yeah, yeah. They're having that block party. They were praying, now they're yelling. And so he's trying to keep them quiet, and he says, now go tell James. Now, here's another James. It's not the same James, of course. James has already died, the apostle. More than likely, this James that's talked about here is the brother of Jesus, would be the one that wrote the book of James. And so, Peter moves on to another place, and that's what we'll pick up on Sunday. Any questions or comments on that? All right, thank you guys for your time tonight.